Thank you,
Thank you so
Susan.
much again. And please, Dr. Angela Brown.
Thank you very much. You know, Susan and I used to share an office, so we both know about the importance of taking time to meditate and have a little bit of joy and peace in our day. Thank you for joining me today in the Stanford Center for Clinical Research Science series. Today is about science, but it's also about you. Meditation impacts focus and concentration, as well as emotional regulation and overall well-being. So for the researchers and the science-minded in this group, an understanding of science can motivate a meditation practice and integration into daily life, with benefits in the workplace and beyond, of course. I ask that you have something to write with today. Also, perhaps a snack, because we will be doing a sensory meditation in which you'll be smelling and tasting. So if you have something with you, wonderful. It doesn't have to be food, it could be a drink. At the conclusion of our discussion today, you'll come to a deeper understanding of your own motivations for attending. You'll explore current science regarding meditation's effects on the brain and body. You'll participate in a sensory meditation. And you'll consider integration of mindful and meditative practices into your daily life. And I'll share the strategies that I use as an emergency medicine physician. So Susan gave me a fantastic introduction. Thank you very much. I am a physician at Stanford. I do direct research efforts at the Stanford Brain Performance Center. I'm also a certified yoga and meditation instructor. I teach concepts of meditation with East-West Yoga. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a working woman in my 40s in leadership roles with demands from home, from work, social circles, demands from my body and mind that can feel exhausting and overwhelming sometimes. I'm sure some of us can empathize with that statement. I am half Indian. My family originated in the New Delhi area of India, and I was raised with traditional practices of Ayurvedic culture, which included observing my grandfather sit for meditation for hours every single day. Hence, it felt comfortable and comforting to me to turn to yoga and meditation many times in my life. When I injured myself doing too much step aerobics 20 years ago, I turned to yoga and meditation. When I worked in the emergency department at Bhutan, I immersed myself in a culture where meditation was a central part of daily life. When my mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer 3 years ago, and I knew I needed to cultivate more stability in myself in order to give her the support that she needed, it turned out that I was also giving myself the support that I needed. Let's talk about what is meditation first, right? Today we've come together from different jobs, different areas of study, different social circles, different hobbies, but with a shared curiosity of how our minds work and how meditation can support us. Practices of meditation and mindfulness are ancient and can be traced back to Eastern Buddhism and yoga philosophy from hundreds of years ago. Core concepts in ancient Indian philosophy are based on a mind and body integration as an embodiment of consciousness, rather than a dualism of mind and body. In traditional Eastern philosophy, meditation and mindfulness are applied as a part of daily life, a way of living, not a specific means to an end, but a broader goal of personal transformation and understanding. So please take that with a grain of salt as we're moving forward, especially if you're new to any of these concepts. Certainly applying meditation as a way of living may not be comfortable for you right now, but as you move on in your practice, you may find that it is just the same as doing a morning stretch to you or taking your after dinner walk. Let's simplify terminology though. Meditation can be seen as a practice of intention to cultivate awareness in the absence of a particular focus. While mindfulness, similar practice, but different in the way it is practiced, it can be seen as a practice of focused awareness. So we have awareness in the absence of a focus for meditation, and then focus on awareness in mindfulness. Both very important strategies for finding peace, harmony, acceptance, and compassion within ourselves. And while mindfulness can be practiced in any moment, meditation is typically a planned practice over a certain period of time. And that planned time period for meditation may be as short as a few minutes, as you'll hear in my practice after a shift in the emergency room, or as long as hours and hours, which I experienced when I was living in Bhutan. Most meditative practices begin by setting an intention. You may have heard of the Sanskrit word sankalpa, meaning a resolve. Our intention for meditation or yogic practices represents what we'd like to consciously or unconsciously explore and strengthen through that practice. It could be an inspiration, a motivation, a metaphor for a core value, a belief, a hope of what we want to project. I personally consider a single descriptive word for what I hope to personify in my day. That's how I start my day. Some days I'll come to a meditative practice in the morning, and I'll consider that today I want to focus on harmony. Other days, love or peace. Other times, understanding or acceptance. For me, focusing on a single word is what works best for me. And certainly there's a reason why I would choose one intention over another on a specific day, depending on what's going on in my life, what stressors I'm facing, what I feel my needs are, what I feel I have to give that day. You know, our minds are always thinking about something, ruminating. We'll talk more about the default mode network of the brain and rumination in future slides, but we're always thinking of something. We're always projecting to the future, deliberating on the past events, even making movies about alternative scenarios that we replay over and over again until it becomes unclear really what is truth and what is our perception of events. So we really benefit from connecting with our deeper intentions. We're going to start with a simple exercise now. I'd like for you to think to yourself, why am I here today? Your answer might be something like, well, I'm here to learn about the neuroscience of meditation, or I'm here because I want to start meditating, or I'm here because I'm a neuroscientist. But that's the surface, and I guarantee that there's more that would be helpful for you to know. This exercise is based loosely in aspects of cognitive behavioral therapy pioneered in the 1960s by Aaron Beck and Albert Ellis and Stanford's very own David Burns. People's emotions and behaviors are influenced by their perceptions of events or their cognition. How we feel is closely related to how we interpret situations rather than by objective situations themselves, be it positive or negative. So the basis for patterns of cognition come from three tenets in the use of cognitive behavioral therapy. Core beliefs, often created during our childhood, dysfunctional assumptions, and negative automatic thoughts. Let me give you an example of how using the why technique, a series of 6 to 7 levels of intent exploration that we will all go through, can uncover these beliefs and assumptions and really return us to our true intentions. So I'm going to answer the why am I here question for myself now with you all. And then I'm going to ask you to do that on your own with a piece of paper and pen for about 2 minutes. So why am I here at this morning, early December morning, neuroscience of meditation session? Well, I am here to share the neuroscience of meditation with you, but why? I feel that understanding science supporting meditation has helped me to add this practice to my life, and I hope the same for you. But why? Why do I need to understand the science? Well, perhaps the neuroscience of meditation provides that extra motivation to do something that can feel difficult. Why is meditation difficult for me? Well, I have a lot on my mind, and it's hard for me to put settling myself ahead of the other things that I have to get done. Why is that hard for me? So I'm going through 6 whys. Sometimes it just feels easier for me to cross things off the list rather than explore an unknown. And why is that? Well, because I don't know where my mind will go and what it will find if I meditate. And that sometimes feels a little scary to me. So if I used this why exercise to help me to set an intention for a meditative practice today, I might select something like a hope for fearless inner exploration. Some theme that I want to cultivate in myself that I realize I have this core belief that's set in a basis of hesitancy or fear. And in a meditative practice in which I know I'm going to take a deeper dive into maybe an unknown, I have a hope for myself that I'll be fearless in that inner exploration. So this is an example of the why technique. It gets us to the seed, be it a hurt or hope to learn more about ourselves. So I'm going to ask you on your pen and paper, or if you don't have a pen and paper, just in your mind, we're going to take 2 minutes to please draw 6 lines. Those are why questions. And ask yourself, why am I here today in this December morning course? When you have your first answer, move to the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth. This is just for you, not to share. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes here on my clock. Thank you for going through that exercise with me. Sometimes from moments of realization of our intentions, we can further develop awareness as well as compassion for ourselves, for others. And we can also understand the complexity of our thought processes. In order to understand how meditation works on our brain, I need to give you some background and tell the brain story, starting with the simplest part. I'm mindful that there may be neuroscientists here with us today, but that some of you joining may have very little experience with neuroanatomy and physiology. And so I hope really to speak to all and certainly welcome questions at the end. One of the tiniest parts of our central nervous system, which includes our brain and our spinal cord, is a neuron. A neuron is a single brain cell, and our brain is made up of about 86 billion neurons that come together to communicate with each other in microseconds. Each neuron has a body and an axon through which electrical impulses travel, relaying chemical messages to the spaces between neurons, the synapse. These messages of sensation or motor movements or connections between neuron to neuron. These messages that are sent and received are the language of neurons in the form of chemical messengers, neurotransmitters. Each of our neurons has an average of 7,000 synaptic connections. And it has been estimated that the brain of a 3-year-old child, I have a 5-year-old, but the brain of a 3-year-old child has 1 quadrillion synapses. This number declines with age, stabilizing into adulthood to some degree. The language of our brain is chemical and electrical. Neurotransmitters affect our mood, emotions, perceptions, and a host of other functions in our brain and body. When engaging in physical exercise that stimulates our cardiovascular system, like running or biking or ice skating this time of year, we'll experience a burst of feel-good neurotransmitters, endorphins and endocannabinoids, and increases in serotonin and dopamine. Meditation may not result in big muscles, or the rush of physical activity that exercise brings, but the effects after 20 minutes of meditation can be perceived. Meditation also is related to endocannabinoid, endorphin, dopamine, and serotonin release, as well as others. I'll take you through many of the neurotransmitters in our brain, not all of them. Adrenaline, noradrenaline, dopamine, serotonin, GABA, acetylcholine, glutamate, and endorphins. You may have heard of these. Adrenaline is often thought of as the fight or flight neurotransmitter. Noradrenaline can be thought of being supportive of states of concentration. Dopamine is in relationship to pleasure. Serotonin supports mood, relaxation. GABA is calming. Acetylcholine is implicated in learning events. Glutamate is often coupled with memory experiences and memory processes. And then endorphins are responsible much for that euphoric feeling, also endocannabinoids, which we've learned in recent years have a large role as well. Hormones like cortisol, the stress hormone, oxytocin, the love hormone, also have significant impacts on our brain and body and have a role in meditation. So meditation does not generally result in a single neurotransmitter increase, but rather overall changes in a more positive, relaxed, and contented direction, with general increases in serotonin, the feel-good neurotransmitter, DHEA, implicated in longevity, endorphins, the natural high growth hormone, as well as decreases in our stress hormone cortisol, increases in melatonin, which may inform the calm feeling after meditation, and improved GABA function, which is an inhibitory neurotransmitter that can support calm. So keep in mind, however, that this body of literature, especially randomized controls trials, are somewhat small. While a good portion of studies support positive improvements in mindful meditators, some studies describe little difference. Different meditation practices, different styles of meditation, different ages of the participants, different time periods, and different outcomes in these studies can make interpretation of the entire body of evidence less than ideal. So overall, I look to meta-analyses and randomized controlled trials really for best information. I'll give you an example. In a randomized controlled trial of about 90 patients with glaucoma, people were assigned to meditate for 3 weeks versus a control group. That study found that there were changes for the better in measures of cortisol, endorphins, brain-derived neurotropic factor, antioxidants, the way that genes were expressed, and of course, lower measures of glaucoma, the primary outcome of the study. Many studies have reported that not only hormones and neurotransmitters are responsive to meditation, but also immunomodulators, which are responsible for our body's immunity, and even our telomeres, parts of our chromosomes, have been associated with aging process, are supported with meditation. This is a figure from a 2020 randomized controlled trial showing the effects of brief mindfulness on positive and negative affect, state of anxiety, and salivary oxytocin level. This group of participants, which was comprised of a total of 68 psychology students, was compared to a control group who underwent a emotion recognition exercise. What they found was that there was a reduction in the negative affect and increased salivary oxytocin in the intervention group. Another randomized controlled randomized controlled trial studied nighttime melatonin levels in meditators practicing different styles of meditation, specifically transcendental meditation and yoga-based meditation, compared to nights in which those meditators did not meditate. What they found was that on the nights that they meditated, there was an increase in melatonin release as compared to the nights when they did not meditate in both groups who practiced different styles of meditation. I mentioned that children have more synaptic connections than adults do. And as children and through our early 20s, our brains undergo dramatic change, really truly growing and pruning connections, building thought patterns, learning, establishing knowledge and memories. These are thought patterns that we frequently turn to, that we return to, actually, that we nourish with our attention, that thrive for better or for worse. Not only are our thoughts intertwined, but emotions, smells, images, muscle memories, tensions are also connected to experience. While most aspects of neurogenesis, the development of new neurons, ends in adolescence, neuroplasticity continues. Neuroplasticity is a brain's ability to form new neural connections, essentially adapting and learning. So I love to share the example that of a study from PNOS in 2000 that demonstrated that taxi drivers in London had larger posterior hippocampi, an area of the brain, compared to controls, and that this difference in the size of a specific area of their brain was related to the length of their driving experience. Similarly, there was a 2004 paper published in Nature, which demonstrated changes in the brains of people who learned to juggle. That study showed a transient and selective structural change in brain areas that were involved in processing and storage of complex visual motion. So these studies demonstrate specific changes in someone who's learning and somebody who's gathered a specific skill. And studies also demonstrate specific changes in the brains of people who meditate. This is the human brain. What we see outwardly is our cerebral cortex, but there are deeper layers as well. We'll see that in a diagram in the next slide. Towards the left of the image is our frontal lobe, where much of our thinking and movement occurs, including our prefrontal cortex. And in the middle and top is our parietal lobe, where sensations are processed. I'm simplifying this to a degree, but generally, there are specific areas of the brain dedicated to a specific thing. The area that extends near the words human brain here is the temporal lobe where hearing occurs. And at the back is the occipital lobe, which houses vision. And then this wrinkly structure here at the bottom is our cerebellum, which is responsible for coordination and balance as we move through the world, as well as a host of other functions. What we see with meditation is a thicker or larger volume to areas and more activation. So for example, in the area of the prefrontal cortex of meditators, we see larger volume and larger functional and more functional connectivity, which is the prefrontal cortex is an area important for intention. I'll show you some images of that shortly. Here we see a cross-section of our brain, and this gives us an idea of other processing centers and connections that certainly support well-being. In deeper brain areas, the cingulate cortex hugs those colorful structures there. The hippocampus, this orange structure, the amygdala, the hypothalamus, this is the hypothalamus, hippocampus, and the amygdala together represent our limbic system. These deeper structures are involved in processing and regulating emotions, the formation and storage of memories, arousal, and learning. These areas are also important for self-regulation, and we see neuroplastic changes here with increased activation in the connections between these structures, even in short-term meditators. Some studies also report measurable changes in the size of these areas in long-term meditators. Neuroimaging suggests that, as with attentional control, level of expertise in meditative practices does affect emotional regulation with different pathways established in long-term meditators. So these images are from a 2010 controlled longitudinal study investigating pre and post changes in brain gray matter concentration following about 2 months of a mindfulness program. These anatomical MRI images from 16 healthy meditation naive participants were obtained before and after they underwent the program, and changes were also compared to a control group. So the study reported increases in the posterior cingulate cortex, the temporoparietal junction, the cerebellum, and the intervention group compared to controls, suggesting that intentional practices of mindfulness result in changes in gray matter concentration in brain regions involved in learning and memory processes, emotional regulation, and self-referential processing. I realize that for some of us who are not very familiar with brain or with neuroanatomy, perhaps all of these different areas of the brain that I'm referring to might feel a bit jumbled right now. Essentially, the take-home message that I'm sharing is really the findings in the specific studies that I'm sharing or the overall body of research is that we see that in these intentional practices for mindfulness or meditation, there are changes in our brain volume and connectivity in specific areas that are involved with learning, memory processing, emotional regulation, and self-referential processing. And what I mean by self-referential processing is the experience of always thinking about how something affects you. Self-referential. I'll get to that more shortly when we talk about the default mode network, actually in the next slide. So what is the default mode network and how is it related to self-referential processing? In meditators, we do see functional changes in the default mode network. And this is a group of brain regions that are engaged in relationship to self-reference. So let me give you an example of what I mean by self-referential. Imagine that you're taking a beautiful hike through the woods. You're with your friend, you're chatting, you're wandering along a path, and you pass by a bike, an old bike, but immediately your mind thinks, what could I do with that bike? Should I take that bike and try to find the owner? Could I rehab that bike? Should I leave that bike there? It all comes back to how the relationship of the bike and you. I love this example, which is not my example. It's actually the example of one of the Brain Performance Center's junior investigators, as he explained the default mode network to the other junior investigators. But I think it's a great representation of self-referential processing and one of the main functions of the default mode network. So the default mode network has been associated with mind wandering, and also with processes ranging from attentional lapses to anxiety and clinical disorders. And a study published in Nature Scientific Reports in 2019 examined structural and functional brain network changes related to this default mode network, as well as the salience network, which identifies maybe aberrancies in your daily life. So for instance, if you're gazing at the sky and see a shooting star, that could be activation of your salience network, as well as your overall executive functioning networks. So after 40 days of mindfulness meditation training in novice meditators, they demonstrated structural and functional changes at specific areas of the default mode network regions where brain thickness, cortical thickness was increased, and changes in connectivity and brain activity, specifically low frequency amplitudes, decreased, showing that even though this was an overall short period of mindfulness meditation training, just 40 days, there were changes in the way that our brain structure could be measured and the way the activity of the brain could be measured. They also, as a secondary outcome, identified correlates with reductions in assessed depression scores. So let's put it all together here. What do we see overall in regards to meditation effects on brain regions? In the cortex, which functions to provide attention, emotion, self-regulation, and awareness, we see enhanced activation and connectivity in specific areas of the brain that I've listed there: the anterior cingulate, prefrontal and posterior cingulate, and some increased volume. At the amygdala, which was one of those colorful structures I showed you on the cross-sectional slide, which functions for emotional processing, including fear states, we see decreased activation and activity. At the striatum and basal ganglia, which is responsible for regulation of attention, we see enhanced activity during rest, but not reward, specifically at the caudate and putamen areas of the brain. And at the hippocampus, which was another one of those colorful structures responsible for memory processing, we see increased activity and volume. At the insula, which is responsible for processing emotion and attention and salience, we see enhanced activity and connectivity. So again, overall, there is a large body of evidence made up of not the very best quality of studies, but there's enough of them that point in a relatively similar direction to support that these changes are very likely to occur secondary to meditation. Of course, we need more large randomized control trials with a rather homogeneous body of outcomes to make definitive conclusions. But what I'm representing to here today is truly a large body of evidence that probably started in the late 1970s. Meditation also affects the energy of our brains. Our brains use neurotransmitters to communicate, and brain waves are the electrical activity that allow for that communication. This energy can be viewed from intense to mellow because the electrical activity patterns of the brain change, and we can measure this activity on EEG. There are 5 main types of brain frequencies: gamma, beta, alpha, and theta brainwaves, as well as delta at the very bottom, the sort of slow meandering one. Gamma and beta brainwaves occur when we're actively learning, thinking, and concentrating on a task. Whereas delta waves occur, the sort of slow one kind of makes sense when we look at the wave, occur when we're in deep sleep. The theta and alpha waves, which occur when the body is alert but relaxed, are amplified in meditation. So sensory meditation with intense focus may result in more alpha wave activity, whereas deep relaxation, such as when you're falling asleep or involved in a yoga nidra style meditation, would be associated with theta waves. So I'm going to go through each of these. The gamma brainwaves are the fastest brainwaves and are associated with heightened mental activity, like when we're learning and problem solving. And they're active when your brain is processing a lot of information from different areas at once, such as when you're in the grocery store trying to locate new ingredients for dinner. Beta brainwaves, those green ones up there, can be detected when we're alert and actively thinking, such as when we're having a conversation with someone, or when we're focused on a task, like listening to this presentation. Alpha brainwaves, the yellowish ones, are detected when the mind is calm and relaxed, but still alert. So these brainwaves would be present during creative activities like planning, and are also detected right before sleep. These are the waves that are detected and increase during meditation. And then we see theta brainwaves, which are measured during deep meditation, daydreaming, and REM sleep. We also see them when we're doing sort of automatic tasks like washing the dishes that don't fully require us to engage in thinking. And then delta brainwaves are the slowest waves, as I said, involved in deep and restorative sleep. So let's put this all together. Let's experience this for ourselves. We'll go through a sensory meditation that will focus on different processing centers in our brain. You can decide if you want to use focused attention on an object, the food in front of you, the food or drink in front of you, or if you prefer to use open monitoring to my cues. And open monitoring means that you are purposely not focusing on something. So I've covered a lot in a relatively short amount of time, in just 45 minutes. Let's take a break for ourselves here and put it all together. Please be comfortable, maybe a comfortable seat, or you're very welcome to lay down. Use this time to place the food that I asked you to bring, or the drink next to you. If you don't have that, it is totally fine. You'll still be able to go through the sensory meditation outside of the eating. And I ask that we take a moment to find ourselves together. Perhaps take a moment here to close your eyes and exhale. If you'd like, you can set an intention for yourself. And just take a few deep breaths. And calming ourselves, and then allowing our breathing pattern to deepen, and allowing our exhales to be prolonged. We're engaging our parasympathetic nervous system, the phase of our nervous system that allows us to rest and digest. And as you settle in, just notice what you hear around you. Maybe it's a refrigerator hum, or birds outside, or people talking in the distance. Just listen and observe. Bring your mind's eye to what sensations you feel against your skin. Maybe there's a breeze if you're outside, or a chill in the air. Can you sense your hair around your neck, or your clothes hugging at your wrists and ankles? Can you sense the ground underneath you? Sit with this sensation of touch. Now, if you have food or a drink with you, place it in the palm of your hand with heavy eyes, and bring your hand to your nose to smell. If you don't have food, you can smell your palms. Really sit in that sensation of smell. Does this scent bring up any feelings, any memories or images? And can you notice the intake of smell coupled with your in-breath? Exhale. Keeping your eyes closed, if you have something to eat or drink with you, taste it, savor it. With your eyes closed, notice, how do the flavors change and evolve in your mouth? And after you've enjoyed that bite or sip, let's return our minds to our breathing. Noticing how the pattern now might be different than when you first began. And then as you're ready, gently open really soft eyes to gaze at the area in front of you, to see the area in front of you without purpose, just noticing, noticing patterns, colors, vibrancy of colors. As thoughts come and go, just guide them on. Just look at your area in front of you. With one or two final breaths in this meditation, perhaps jot a few words down about how you're feeling, what you noticed. And when you're ready, please return to your computer screen where I've highlighted some neuro images of real-time depictions of activity in a brain as that subject is doing something. They're resting in the top row and then walking, seeing, hearing, thinking, and remembering in the bottom row. And what we notice here is that the areas of orangish red correspond with areas in that subject's brain with higher activity. And we can put this together in remembering the neuroanatomy slides that I shared, in which the hearing parts of our processes, or at least the hearing processing centers of our brain at the temporal lobe, are just on the side by our ears. You can see that here. And the visual processing centers in our occipital lobe at the back are lit up as this person was seeing and looking. Similarly, areas of thinking and remembering are highlighted here. So demonstrating truly, just as we've demonstrated in our sensory meditation, that different parts of our brain are working at different times. And now let's look at this image together. A grocery store. A usual image for many of us who have the task of being the person to go grocery shopping in their household. We really live in a busier and busier world, it feels like, especially with the advent of mobile devices, in which we can do so many things in the palm of our hand. Multitasking is still considered a skill, but let's consider a simple trip to the grocery store and really look at the various colors and patterns and words that really do require reading and comprehension from floor to ceiling. We can imagine, as we're traversing this aisle, that we're pushing a cart and it's probably squeaking and creaking. People are talking around us. There's probably music playing in the background. We can smell the produce and the cleaning products. We're pushing this cart and we're balancing as we're trying to reach for items and throw it in our cart. Some of us are even chatting on the phone while we're doing all of this. And so this is really an example of, wow, our brain is doing so many things in a simple trip to the grocery store. We can imagine all the areas of our brain that would be fired as we're going through this really, what most of us can simple errand. But can I use this example to even suggest that this is a representation of many of our somewhat nonstop lives in 2021, soon to be 2022? The momentum of constantly stimulated and actively thinking brain is hard to halt. I feel it. Maybe it's so hard that we even shy away from clearing our minds. Maybe after a busy day, instead of saying, I'm going to lay down and just clear my mind and relax, we turn to, I'm going to scroll through social media to soothe myself, but it's still stimulating me. And so to really think about what we turn to when we feel overwhelmed, overstressed, and overstimulated. Are we addressing our needs via escapism or a soothing behavior that perhaps isn't the calming and centering practice that would be best? Just a thought to consider. Certainly no judgment. I scroll through social media often, but in the grand scheme of things, I practice over and over and over again of perhaps not halting that momentum. Are we perpetuating a cycle of stress and habits that are overall not helpful? So I'm a physician that cares for people, generally young adults and children with medical emergencies. I will be honest, my mind races after a busy day. This is a natural tendency for all of us, and we turn towards methods of relaxation that have been specifically crafted, right, for mind-numbing diversion, for the easy escape from a heavy feeling of a racing mind. So maybe I'll come home and put on the TV or scroll through the internet or eat comforting foods and drinks. However, meditate and that that is fine. There's a time and place for everything. But meditation is the technique that I have found not only soothes my busy mind, but also supports my resilience. So this is what I do. After a day at work is done, I don't leave quite yet because I don't like to come home to my family with that racing busy mind. I feel like sometimes I can't even focus on saying hello to them. That's how my mind can race at times. So what I do is I find a spot at the hospital that feels beautiful yet quiet to me. Maybe it's just a room with a closed door, or maybe it's a space outside on a bench, or sometimes it's a hidden corner in the cafeteria, depending on the day. And I set my timer on my phone for 6 minutes. That's my magical number that I have started with and I continue to use. I let myself just sit and breathe and be quiet there. I don't scroll through my phone. If I'm feeling unconscious about or self-conscious about people looking at me and wondering what I'm doing with my eyes closed in the corner, then I'll select a quieter, more private spot. And when I'm doing this for 6 minutes, my mind will wander a lot. It certainly will. That's totally normal. And I'll acknowledge these thoughts that come through and I'll let them pass on. And I'll say, oh, did you remember to buy that Christmas present for that person? Or did you, don't forget to put your daughter's book in her backpack? And I'll say, not right now. And I'll just let them pass on. And I'll do this over and over again for 6 minutes. And by the end, it has gotten a lot easier and my shoulders feel less tense and I feel more alert. And I feel that I have made space in myself to go home and greet my family with the mood and attitude that they deserve and that I deserve to enjoy with them. And sometimes, many times actually now, it didn't happen this much in the beginning, but sometimes when my timer goes off at 6 minutes, I just say snooze and I keep going and I keep going. And I enjoy if I'm enjoying at that moment. So I'd like to ask you, will you consider taking 6 minutes for yourself after work each day for the next month as your own science experiment? And maybe reflect come February or mid-January, how fast you can calm down in stressful situations or how you may greet challenge differently. The neuroscience of meditation really impacts enhanced self-regulation through improved attentional control, emotional regulation, and present moment awareness. Minutes of meditation a day can bring this feeling of space, clarity, and empathy to aspects of our daily interactions. So I've shared how I use meditation routinely through my day, but I also turn to it for longer periods of time and in different settings as well. There are many types of meditation out there. And there's not a strong body of evidence to support that a certain type of meditation is better for a certain type of person. So this is going to be what speaks to you. And perhaps that will change over time. Sometimes using a stimulus like a sensory meditation can help you to bring focused awareness or open monitoring. Or counting your breaths. I have a magic number of breaths. I need to count to at least 40 of them in order to start to feel that release and that calmness and that centeredness. It doesn't work for me after 20 breaths. And you will find your own magic number, your own way that brings about a feeling in you that you're hoping for. So once you've tried a certain type of meditation, you might decide to explore other types, such as loving kindness meditation, focused attentional awareness, or vipassana, Zen or transcendental meditation, progressive relaxation meditation, and yoga nidra, which is one of my very favorites. If you haven't heard of yoga nidra, consider taking a class or joining a YouTube session in the evening when you're getting ready for bed. and mindfulness meditation, to name a few. I really started my mindfulness meditation journey here at Stanford years and years ago. I joined a health improvement program class, and I was paired with a fantastic instructor. Her name was Patty, and she sat with me. This is one of the incredible benefits that working at Stanford can bring. I subsequently took a laughter meditation class and just really enjoyed exploring this area through the courses offered at Stanford. So again, I want to bring us back home as we're wrapping up our session to the terms mindfulness and meditation again. So stemming from really the Buddhist concept of equanimity, mindfulness can be defined as non-judgmental attention in the present moment. As we're finishing this class and you are out walking to your next destination, as you are gazing at your surroundings and just being an observer, you are practicing a sense of mindfulness. Meditation, on the other hand, is a deliberate focus on awareness without attention on something in particular. It's an anchor of just simply being. So mindfulness and meditation definitely go hand in hand, and they strengthen each other and they strengthen you. Mindfulness meditation can use techniques like focusing on your breath or intentional meditation. And while we refer to non-judgment in these practices as being an observer, of being kind and acknowledging what's floating through your mind and letting it go. So non-judgmental. Both of these practices are really not without bias, right? Because we're practicing mindfulness and meditation really by motivation for calm and health. But I think this bias in our practice is generally a positive thing, right? We're doing this for ourselves. And another important perspective that I brought up in the beginning to ponder moving forward is the perception of these of meditation and mindfulness as practices, right? Considering moving that into instead a way of your life, a way of your being. Just as you comb your hair in the morning, you are finding center by observing the world around you, by taking moments for yourself to be open and deeply explore your mind without a particular focus. So I'd like to say here, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to get to spend the morning with you today. I have posted a list of selected scholarly articles. I highly recommend as a great review, the first one by Tang and Posner. Posner has published a lot in this area. He's since retired. It's the work is The Neuroscience of Mindful Meditation in Nature Reviews of Neuroscience from 2015. And that work goes through many aspects of what I've discussed today: neurotransmitters, EEG, volume and structural and functional changes in the brain, and really lays out what evidence is out there now. Certainly it's probably evidence that was out there about 8 years ago, and there's been much more evidence since then, but it lays out the evidence from that time period up to probably 2014 with a unbiased presentation for the most part that says, look, here's the shortcomings of what we have, here's the strengths of what we have, here's where next steps lie. And so that's why I really like this review article from Nature. At this point, we're at 10:10, and we are together for another 20 minutes. If you like, I certainly wouldn't take it the wrong way if you have other things to do and are going to go ahead and head off of this session at this point, but I'm going to stick around to answer questions. I'm going to leave it up to Susan as far as how it's best to address those questions, either via chat or by people raising their hands. And I do see already that in the chat, there's a question about what is the most effective way, time, or length of meditation practice to achieve the best effects on our brain? This is a wonderful question. Thank you for asking it. I don't have an answer for you. And the reason why I don't have an answer for you is because I'm science minded, and I'm looking towards the literature that's out there, which is so heterogeneous that it can't speak directly to me as what is best for me as a woman in my 40s. So certainly there's studies that have been done on populations of exclusively men in their 20s or mixed populations after their 60s, and might suggest that a certain type of meditation had specific outcomes or effects that were beneficial to that cohort. But I can't say specifically for you or for me what works best and for how long. This is something that I think we really need to tap into ourselves, experiment with, and see, just kind of go back to being a little old school and just see, do what feels good to us, right? If it feels good, it's probably good. I think that can be true in meditation, not in all things, but certainly to consider that instead, and really to explore what feels best for you, and depending on what you're looking for. As far as time periods, well, my daughter's 5, and I wanted to start her on a track towards a future practice of meditation. So we started with 1 minute together. Actually, in future talks, I'm reminded, I'm going to put a picture of her I took of her trying to meditate for 1 minute. Her face was like so adorable. But we moved up to 2 minutes, and now she's at 5 minutes. And that's a good spot for her. And when I started, I was at 6 minutes, and that was a good spot for me at that time. But some days I can do 2 hours, and that's what feels right that day. So I would say no less than 6 minutes. Ideally, at least 10 or 15 minutes if you can in your day. And that sounds so small, doesn't it? Oh yeah, I can find 10 or 15 minutes in a day, but when we're really in our day, sometimes carving out those 10 and 15 minutes for whatever the reason feels like more of a challenge. So I hope that answered your question. I know it wasn't the definitive answer that you probably hoped for, but I would say if you're brand new, how about start out with 6 or 7 minutes and then try to build up from there. Someone wants to ask if we can get the references. I will certainly share all of my slides with Susan and ask you, Susan, kindly, if you could help to distribute them. I'd really appreciate it. Or additionally, if anyone is interested in connecting further, you are more than welcome to email me. My email is alumba@stanford.edu. So that's ALUMBA@stanford.edu. And certainly happy to share those references. I'm seeing that someone else is asking, do I have a recommendation for getting young children into meditation? I have a very active 9-year-old. We tried meditation for a while, maybe 1.5 years. That's amazing. But he's gotten bigger and more active and harder to keep him focused. Any ideas are welcome. I have some suggestions. So I really enjoy the online platform Allo Moves, and I think actually Stanford had supported that yoga platform last year. I'm not sure if they will again this year, but Allo Moves has yoga for kids and kids meditation, and they're very reasonable amounts of time. So especially for my daughter who feels like it's a treat to watch something, this is a good strategy for me. And I'll give you an example of one of the meditations for kids that also can speak to adults that's on Allo Moves. One of them talks about, is speaking to the children, with children there amongst the presenter, talking about imagining yourself in the backseat of a car and you're approaching a green light. And how do you feel in a green light? You feel good. It's like when you're playing with your friends, you feel confident. And how would you feel at a red light if that represented an emotion? The red light emotions would be anger, frustration, loneliness. And what this presenter goes on to say is that you can't go from green light to red light. There has to be a yellow light. And they encourage children to find their yellow light, to find a pause in themselves, before they react in the red light, to find deep breathing. And it's a really lovely, like short 5-minute meditation. My daughter loved it. So I could speak to that. On YouTube, there are certainly kids meditations. But again, what I do with my daughter, I've gotten her into journaling. So she might journal for a little while, and then we sit with our timer, and we do our 5 minutes, which is what she can handle right now. There's certainly also, as we are evolving as a community, there are yoga studios and that offer meditations in person, including outside, in case you feel like your child might benefit from a group setting. But I would recommend either something online that you could do together as an experience, or just sitting with a timer.
Thank you. I love that idea. Can you just say the name again? Aloe Moves?
Yeah,
like aloe the plant?
The Aloe Moves, ALOMOVES. Aloe Moves is an online yoga platform. They have lots of classes, and they also have classes in meditation. They also have classes for kids. And it was my go-to during the pandemic, in addition to YouTube, specifically YouTube with Cassandra, I liked a lot. And she also has meditation there, but not specifically meditation for kids.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to welcome you to ask any questions. And I'm going to stop share so I can see everyone. And I will be on for the next 15 minutes. So if you want to wait a while to ask your question, you're welcome to.
Yeah, thank you so much, Angela. We really appreciate it. It was a wonderful presentation, very informative and very timely, I believe. 2 years into pandemic, we all are feeling the effect of it on us, and definitely changing and integrating some of these practices into our daily life is gonna make a big difference in how we feel about the pandemic and everything else in between. It was really an honor and a pleasure to have you. And again, as Dr. Lumba-Brown mentioned, you don't have to stay. If you have any question, please feel free to stay. If not, enjoy the rest of your day. I will send out an evaluation, and I will include a copy of the slides, and the recording of this session will be available on our website, on SCCR website. I will send the link to you in the email, but I'm also putting the evaluation in the chats in case you just wanted to complete the evaluation right away, right there. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Have a wonderful, healthy, happy holiday ahead. And thank you so much, Dr. Lumba-Brown, for your time from your busy schedule to present this wonderful, timely topic. Thank you so much.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
And stay around for questions. If not, we can end it. I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you. Thank you. And so it looks like everyone is signing off. It was such a pleasure. Happy holidays to you all.